Welcome in. We have a lot to talk about. This weekend has been very busy when it comes to Iran, the Middle East, the United States. The Iranians are willing to step to the table now. We're going to dive into that, look at some of the specifics and some of the things that their leadership is saying. And there's some conflicting information or at least messaging that's coming out. So we'll dive into that. We have new warships from other countries that have shown up in the region, changing that. And the United States continues to flow aircraft into the region, plus defensive capabilities. So a lot has transpired. But first, let's jump into what the Iranian president put out just yesterday. The president has ordered direct negotiations with the United States on the nuclear issue. And I think that's the part we'll highlight here and look at some other Iranian leadership and what they're saying, but talks to begin soon in Turkey. So they're saying they're willing to come to the table. But with that, I'd like to jump over to what their foreign minister has said. And we need to listen to this very specifically.
Things like ballistic missiles, things like proxy forces in the region. I know that the United States has talked about wanting to negotiate about that as well. Is that completely out of the question for you, or is that something you could at least talk about?
Again, remember, so he's asking about nuclear weapons, but you heard the ballistic missiles as well as the proxy forces.
President Trump said no nuclear weapons, and we fully agree with that. That could be a very good deal. Of course, in return, we expect sanction lifting. So that deal is possible. Let's do not talk about impossible things.
So let's not talk about impossible things. So what are those impossible things? Now, if you're the Iranians and you heavily rely upon proxy forces and ballistic missiles, are they willing to give these up or even entertain the ideas? And by acknowledging the proxy forces and how they utilize those, that's a whole nother can of worms that potentially they're not even willing to open or acknowledge how they're utilizing those forces, even though it's the worst known secret in the region. So that's their foreign minister and their president have both said this. Well, let's jump over to what is going on in Parliament and see what they're saying.
همینجا اعلام میکنم که طبق بند 7 قانون اقدام متقابل در برابر اعلام سپاه به عنوان سازمان تروریستی ارتش کشورهای اروپایی گروه تروریستی محسوب میشوند و عواقب این اقدام به عهده اتحادیه اروپا خواهد بود.
So the Iranian parliament speaker has hereby declared Article 7 of the intervention law to face the declaration of the IRGC as a terrorist organization. So European countries, the European Union, their armies are considered terrorist organizations. Now, obviously, in any government, you have different agencies, different entities. Usually here we see them pretty aligned as far as the saber rattling, but we do have some back and forth with the negotiations. And I think some posturing basically to try to give them teeth when it comes to the negotiation piece that they mean business. Next piece I want to jump over to is what's popping out from Iran as well, talking about how their doctrine has shifted. We talked about this in the last video. My opinion is you have Iran that had their eye poked. They cannot have that happen again. So if I was Iranian leadership, absolutely, I would be looking at all my defensive capabilities, all my offensive capabilities over the last 7 months or so, making sure that I don't get poked in the eye again. So they have now said that their doctrine has shifted from a defensive to an offensive doctrine, and that they're going to unleash the full might of asymmetric warfare if they are attacked. That their attacks were more or less symbolic in response to Operation Midnight Hammer, and this time around the gloves would be off. So as I talked about, any kind of conflict that arises out of this is not going to look like a surgical strike out of Operation Midnight Hammer. I mean, obviously those strikes would be involved, but this thing will escalate quickly. While Iran has allies such as China and Russia, we now have seen a change when it comes to their iron in the region. So China has deployed an advanced stealth destroyer near the Iranian coast. This is not just a random happening. This is not an exercise. This is a direct challenge to the United States, showing support for the Iranian regime. But again, you can see this posturing by the United States is obviously signaling what potentially might happen. And everyone is showing up to this party where, again, something kicks off. This thing goes much differently than it did before. 20% of the world's oil flows right there through the Strait of Hormuz. So people have a vested interest in this. And to that point, this is a post from Air Force Global Strike Command's deputy commander, which I personally agree with. And this is Lieutenant General Jason Armagos. And talking about Midnight Hammer specifically. And we highlighted this in the last video. He recently told reporters at the Mitchell Institute that Operation Midnight Hammer was like a play in the game. It wasn't the game at large. So one series, one at bat, however you want to look at it. Iran did respond to Midnight Hammer, U.S. strikes last June against its nuclear sites by launching a small ballistic missile attack against a single base in the region in an attempt to look strong to their domestic audience, but also to de-escalate tensions with the United States. More or less a political game, right? Like, we punched you, we're gonna let you hit back so you can kind of save face, but we're done here. If the United States were to undertake a major air campaign against Iran, Tehran would respond with as much firepower as it could muster, deploying its arsenal of short and medium-range ballistic missiles against the United States and Israeli positions across the Middle East. And we have a lot of bases, a lot of aircraft, a lot of ships, and a lot of personnel in the region. And they know where all those spots are. Iran would most likely mobilize its proxy forces, directing Shia militia groups to launch attacks in the region. Israel has battled Hezbollah in Lebanon and defeated Hamas in Gaza, but Tehran could encourage Yemen-based Houthis to target tankers and launch drone and missile strikes against civilian and military infrastructure in the region. And Iraqi militias and extremist groups in Syria could also mount attacks against U.S. forces, and this is coming out of the Wall Street Journal. So I think it is a positive that Iran is willing to come to the table and negotiate this. Honestly, as this has built up, we keep sending more forces to the Middle East. You have to look at what is the exit option. Who saves face here? This thing is a powder keg, and it would not be like Operation Midnight Hammer, where, again, in and out, this thing would escalate very quickly. And we're looking at a big problem set from defending forces, conducting operations, sustainment, and everything in between. And we haven't even talked about allies of Iran jumping into the mix here. Clearly, they're in the region, and undoubtedly, they're in the country helping them right now, as they have been. So let me know your thoughts, and we'll see you next time.